This gas station story is unlike any other. There's something about working the night shift at a gas station that's just uniquely strange. It's not the quiet that gets you, it's the repetition. The same soft beep of the door, the same few customers, the hum of the refrigeration units, the glow of the lights that never go off. And after a while, it stops feeling like real life. You're awake when the world sleeps, a ghost serving coffee to other ghosts. My name's Mason. I started working at Hollow Pines Gas and Food 6 years ago. The first year was just lonely. Then it started becoming something else. The man in the flannel jacket. The first time I saw him was in October. He didn't say a word. He just stood near the snack aisle, watching me. Old flannel, graying beard, no gloves. His hands were shaking, but not from cold. It was something deeper, like he was holding in a vibration the rest of us couldn't feel. He left without buying anything that night, and I thought nothing of it until the next night when he came in again, and the next. Same time, same mints, same silence.
Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and supporting the channel by following the links in the description. Viewer discretion is advised. This is the host. Today's creepy tale comes from user Mara Calhoun. It's titled The Unspoken Horror. Let's begin. Part 1. The Unspoken. The surviving don't always look brave. They don't speak with clarity. They don't move with purpose. They blink more, tear longer. They repeat small, unrelated details because their minds can't forget the quiet moments before the horror. That's how Mira Calhoun tells the story. She doesn't call it an attack. She doesn't say massacre. She just says Cabin 9, the quiet weekend. Mira and 5 of her friends had rented a rustic lodge for the weekend annual trip they'd done since college. No cell signal, no internet, just trees, a lake, and the old-fashioned log cabins clustered at the base of a long gravel drive. Cabin 9 was the last one at the end. A little more isolated, quieter. Myra says it smelled faintly of cedar and ash. The floorboards creaked like they were speaking in their sleep. There were antlers mounted above the fireplace and a wool blanket that always felt damp, no matter how warm the room became. There was a storm the first night, soft rain, light thunder. They played cards, drank, and shared stories they half remembered from when they used to be closer. It wasn't until morning that they noticed the first thing. A folded piece of paper outside the front door. "Turn around," it said in red marker. No name, no context, nothing else. They thought it was a prank, a neighbor, another camper. But there were no other campers. They'd rented the whole site. The first vanishing, it happened in silence. Mira's friend, since childhood, had stepped outside to collect firewood near the tree line. He never came back. The others searched for him in a semi-serious way at first, calling, half laughing, thinking he'd gone to scare them. But they found no trail. Only the firewood bundle on the ground. One piece snapped in two, as if dropped quickly. Then came the second note, slid under the cabin door that night. You have not seen my face into the long night. The rest of the night was fractured. Mira describes the feeling not as fear, but as disbelief in slow motion. The air seemed off. Time lagged behind their movements. Noises began. Tapping on windows. Sometimes so faint, they weren't sure it was real. And then they found the marker black handprint pressed on the outside of the glass, as if someone had leaned in from the dark and waited. One of the friends wanted to leave immediately. Another said they were overreacting, but the car keys were missing, and the main gate was chained shut. Mira remembers sitting in the main room, staring at the door. She kept whispering, "We're being watched," without knowing why she was so certain. It was just after 3 a.m. when she'd stepped into the hallway to check the back exit, and there he was, standing at the far end, halfway in shadow. He wore a gray coat. A welding mask covered his face, completely still. Not staring, not moving, just standing. She turned back and closed the bedroom door, slowly, without panic, locked it, sat down, and waited. No banging, no footsteps. Just the wind and the creaking floor. The escape. Morning brought a strange, flat light, grayish and cool. The front door was slightly open. No one else was inside. No bodies, no blood. Only the rooms, neat and untouched. Mira walked the entire length of the gravel path, barefoot, dazed. The front gate was still chained, but the fence was low. She climbed it, kept walking. Eventually, a local farmer picked her up on the main road, miles from the cabin site. When police arrived, cabin 9 was empty. No signs of forced entry, no trace of the other guests, and no record of any man matching Mira's description. The after Myra still doesn't call herself a survivor. She doesn't speak in dramatics. She doesn't describe the fear. Instead, she mentions the smell of the wood stove. The strange way the cabin's shadow didn't shift with the sun. How the clouds sat perfectly still that morning, as if nothing had happened. When asked why she didn't fight, scream, or run during the night, she simply says, "I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I don't think it ever truly noticed I was there." Some believe her. Others think it was trauma, hallucination, or memory collapse. But when asked if she'd ever returned to the area, she shakes her head slowly. There are places that don't want to be found. Cabin 9 is one of them. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like and subscribe. They say janitors see everything. They're the last to leave. The first to notice something wrong. They sweep through every hallway, hear every creak, pass every locked door. but no one looks at them twice. That suited Thomas Ray Weller just fine. Thomas worked at Brookfield Elementary School, tucked between two aging neighborhoods, wrapped in ivy and chipped paint. It had been here long before Thomas, longer than most everyone in town could remember. For decades, it had stood empty during summer holidays, its halls silent except for the wind whistling through broken window panes. Then the trickle of new families moving into the neighborhood turned to a steady stream, and Brookfield Elementary opened its doors again. Thomas came along with the reopening. He wore the same gray work shirt every day, carried a battered lunchbox that always smelled faintly of oranges, and whistled just one tune, over and over, always out of tune. It didn't matter how many times the students begged him to stop. Mr. Weller just kept whistling. To the kids, he was Mr. Weller. To the teachers, he was helpful, quiet, respectful. He remembered birthdays. He restocked the coffee station without being asked. He cleared the snow before anyone arrived. They liked him, but they never really knew him. Every janitor has a storage closet, but Mr. Weller's was more like a bunker. 2 locks, a keypad, and signs warning about hazardous material. A detail no one questioned. Inside, behind cleaning supplies and a loose panel in the drywall, was a space no one else knew about. A small room, no bigger than a walk-in closet, dimly lit by a lamp with a red bulb. There were notebooks, dozens of them, stacked with meticulous care, each labeled by date, initials, and location. The handwriting was pristine, block letters, measured spacing. Each entry began with the same line. No one noticed today. He never spoke about it, not even once. And it wasn't until years later, when Brookfield Elementary was emptied of students for the summer, that anyone noticed his strange habit. They saw him slip into the supply closet every morning and heard him enter the inner room, the one with the peeling paint and the faded yellow hazard tape across the door. That's where he spent most of his time, in that little room with the red light. It didn't take long for curiosity to turn into suspicion. One teacher decided to investigate. She waited until she was alone in the building, then snuck into the supply closet. She pushed against the taped-off door, and it swung open. On the other side was another door, this one with 2 locks and an electronic keypad. She tried the handle, locked. She listened at the door. Silence. She tried the second lock, then pressed her ear against the cool metal. She could hear him in there, whispering. She rushed to the nearest phone and dialed the police, breathlessly explaining what she'd found. By the time the officers arrived, though, the coast was clear. The room was empty except for dust motes dancing in the dim light. So they tore down the door, ripping off the keypad and forcing the locks. Behind them, they found the room. The only interesting detail was a loose brick near the baseboard. Curious, the lead officer tapped it with his flashlight and it gave way slightly, revealing a hollow space behind it. He reached inside, pulled out a notebook, blew off the cobwebs, and opened it. It was filled with neat columns of writing, dates, initials, locations, all of it handwritten in the same careful style. The top entry read, "No one noticed today." Below, it was a drawing of a keyhole. Next to it, the date, September 29th, 1987. The officer flipped through the book, frowning. He found more drawings, this time of doorknobs and deadbolt locks, and beneath them, more dates. Then he saw the first name scribbled in the margin. He looked up, searching for a matching face, but all he found was another date and the next name. There were so many entries, so many names, and the journal went on for years. Every page, the same format, the same vigilance. No one noticed. No one else noticed. The police found several more notebooks in the room, each meticulously organized, each starting with the same phrase. But none of them seemed to have any connection to the school or its staff. They did find a box of photos, though. Hundreds of Polaroids lined the cardboard, and the dates on the images confirmed what they already suspected. Thomas had been keeping watch over Brookfield Elementary for decades. But what was he watching? Most of the photos were innocuous. They showed classrooms, empty playground, equipment, lockers, staff meetings. And as the years passed, some of the pictures changed. There were fewer photos of rooms and more of faces. Students, mostly younger ones. He photographed them from afar, capturing their backs as they walked down hallways, their heads bent over their desks, their hands raised in class. Many of the children he photographed were still there, still attending Brookfield Elementary, and the police contacted them, asking if they remembered anything unusual, anyone who might have made them uncomfortable. But none of them did. They thanked the officers politely and hung up. Those were the easy cases. Others were much more difficult. There were hundreds of names in the journals, but few matched any missing person reports, and the entries themselves weren't confessions. They weren't threats. They were just observations. They were watch logs. So the police left Thomas alone. Or at least they tried to. For weeks after the discovery, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something, that there was a connection somewhere, some thread, tying all these years and all these children together. But where? Then, one day, a young detective stumbled upon an entry that sparked an idea. It was dated November 1998. The initials were JH, and the location was listed as room 203. That was an old staff bathroom. The school had been renovated since then, but nothing had changed. So, the detective approached the construction manager and asked him to hold off on demolishing the bathroom. A few hours later, he returned with an evidence team. They drilled a hole into the wall and slid a small camera through it. On the other side was another bathroom, exactly as it had appeared in the photo, down to the missing towel and the scuffed floor tiles. And in the corner, nestled beneath the sink, they found a key. It fit the lock on the supply closet perfectly. So they slipped inside and discovered another key on a lanyard. The last initial etched into the metal was TRW. The detective ran it through the system and found a match. Thomas Ray Weller, current janitor at Brookfield Elementary. He was brought in for questioning, but Thomas didn't resist. He allowed the officers to search his home, to scour his belongings, to pore over his bank statements. Everything was above board. He even invited them to visit his workplace. When they arrived at the school, however, the sight that greeted them made them pause. Hundreds of students and teachers were gathered in the courtyard. They were holding a going-away party for Mr. Weller, who was retiring after 40 years of service. And that's when the new principal, who'd never even met Thomas, said something strange. The alarm logs showed the building was being accessed every Sunday night between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., long after the janitor had supposedly left the job. But there was never any sign of a break-in, only the scent of bleach and the faint, familiar sound of a whistle echoing through the vents. Thomas smiled then, a sad, tired smile. "That would be me," he said softly. "I just liked to come back and watch. Make sure everything was all right, you know." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I didn't want anything to change." And as the detectives watched him, as they took in his frail form and watery eyes, as they saw the well-wishing students and sympathetic colleagues, they felt something cold and hard settle in their stomachs. Because they just knew he wasn't talking about the school.
It began with silence, the kind you don't notice until it becomes total, the kind that makes you turn off the music, pause your conversation, look around, and wonder if something is listening. This was how Olivia first described that moment in the forest cabin just before things turned. She and Jonah had come to the woods to escape from screens, from traffic, from obligations. A quiet anniversary trip, no reception, no neighbors, no noise, except the kind that crept in after dark. They arrived on a Friday. The cabin was old but clean, A-frame style. 2 rooms, a narrow loft. The scent of pine clung to the walls, and the floorboards creaked like they remembered every visitor. It was remote, truly remote. No driveways, only a hiking trail winding in from the south. The couple unpacked, made tea, lit the fire. They read, talked, watched the embers settle. They didn't hear the camera shutter on the first night, or see the shadow that stood near the tree line behind the kitchen window, just past the reach of the lantern light. They were too busy making dinner, laughing, talking about the day ahead. Nothing to report. Day 2. No signs of intrusion, at least none they could prove. Things began to change when they opened the guest book. Each page was filled with positive reviews of the location, the scenery, the cleanliness. But most entries closed with the same phrase, "Thanks for watching." Olivia showed her husband. They laughed, thought it was funny, shared a kiss. Jonah didn't see the boot print in the wet grass that night, didn't notice the line of pebbles leading from the trees to the back porch. He slept soundly until Olivia nudged him in the middle of the night. "Did you just see that?" she asked. She pointed to the window. "Just a branch," Jonah mumbled sleepily. But Olivia was sure it was a shadow. They watched that corner for the rest of the night, first skeptically, then terrified. No one knows how long they sat like that, how many hours they wasted arguing over a shadow. By morning, it didn't matter. They needed to talk. They needed answers, so they went for a walk. That's when they found the trail cam. It was stuck to a tree with duct tape, dirty and surrounded by twigs. Jonah felt his heart sink when he looked at the screen. It had been tampered with, smashed, and torn away from its mount. The couple looked at each other, then quickly left. When they got back to the cabin, things felt different, heavy. Olivia said she felt like they were being watched. The sun was already setting. Jonah told her to relax, made her dinner. Afterward, they cleaned. The dishes were stacked. Olivia noticed a small smudge on the counter, wiped it with a cloth, then gasped. Her hand was covered in soot. Jonah came to see what she was looking at. He smelled smoke, then fear. He grabbed her hand. "We need to get out of here," he said. The air grew cold. Candles flickered on their own in the windows. The fire in the hearth flared without reason. Both of them were scared now, no longer sure if this was some prank or something far more sinister. Olivia decided to look in the attic. There was a ladder in the corner. She pulled it out. It was sturdy, held her weight. It was also covered in initials carved deep into the wood. She saw her name and then Jonah's. Next to those were random letters and numbers. But at the top of the ladder, a symbol, an upside-down heart. Olivia smiled sadly. She climbed down. She didn't want Jonah to see her face, waited until he went back to the fire. Then she took the flashlight from his pocket. He didn't seem to notice. She hid it under the rug. She couldn't bear to be around him anymore. She needed to get out of there. She couldn't breathe. The air was stale, the silence heavy. She needed fresh air. She needed to run. As she walked away, she thought she could hear the wood settling, the walls breathing. When she turned back, she thought she saw something moving in the loft above the bedroom. Jonah woke up in the middle of the night. His arm was empty where Olivia had been sleeping. He got out of bed and saw the window open. Moonlight poured in, catching dust motes dancing in the breeze. He knew immediately what he would find. He didn't bother turning on the light. He knelt down and picked up the flashlight. It was his. Then he heard the sound coming from underneath the floorboards. It wasn't words, just sounds, repetitions, like breathing, but slower and focused, almost as if someone was waiting for them to hear it. Olivia was gone. Jonah found her jacket on the floor, crumpled and abandoned. He stepped outside into the darkness. The fire had died. All he could hear was the wind, branches creaking, birds calling out. He called for her, but his voice sounded thin and weak against the forest. He didn't know how long he stayed there, but eventually he found his way back to the road. He followed its curves and dips, hoping it would lead him to a car, a house, anything. Instead, it brought him to a clearing and a sign. The trail continued on, but it was blocked by a fence. A blue tarp was stretched across its opening, tying it down. What looked like hundreds of pebbles. Jonah searched for another way out, found nothing. His phone was dead, his pockets empty. He was trapped. There was no way out. He sat down on a nearby log. The sooner they found him, the better. Better than this. Better than whatever awaited him beyond that tarp. He fell asleep. Sometime later, he woke up to voices. Flashes of light blinded him. A woman kneeling beside him asked if he was okay. She introduced herself as a search and rescue officer. Jonah learned they'd found Olivia's jacket on the trail, and her scent led them to him. They brought him water, blankets, and a helicopter ride out. Jonah pointed at the tarp. The officers promised to send someone back for it. He watched them go, feeling relieved. It was over. He'd be safe. Then he remembered the cabin, their anniversary trip, the trail cam. He tried to tell the officers, but they were already moving him toward the helicopter. As he climbed aboard, he turned for one last look. On the ground below, an officer retrieved the tarp from the fence. Fanar, hey, wanna play a game? Whoever you are, show yourself. Do it now. Hurry up. Fine. If you can't see me, then I'll come to you. The couple never got any answers. Their story ended right there. That's why we're telling it tonight, to bring closure to a terrifying mystery. Because even though the police searched the area, they never found any evidence of foul play. No cameras, no signs of intrusion, not even a fingerprint. They even checked the guest house. But that entry was almost 20 years old. The owners of the cabin had no record of who rented it that weekend. And no one has since, because the property has been abandoned. Ever since the police removed the blue tarp from the trail, not a single person has set foot on that property. There isn't even a realtor listing. It's never been our policy to ignore pleas for help. We know how desperate these situations can be for the people involved. But this case, it's different. See, sometimes you gotta protect the witnesses. And remember, don't believe everything you see, but believe everything you feel. And if you feel afraid, well, then you probably should be.